Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's session of the Strategic Planning Committee, today, Monday, the 24th of January, 2022. Just a reminder for today's virtual informal meeting, when a decision is required, committee members will express a minded to decision in respect of recommendations set out in the officer report, with decisions being taken under officer delegated authority in the light of the minded to decisions expressed by members in this virtual meeting. And just a reminder that Mike Garrity is the officer delegated with the job of making the decisions this afternoon. Having said that, if I move on now to, do we have any apologies for this afternoon's meeting, please, Elaine?
We do. We have 4 apologies from councillors Belinda Rideout, Mike Dyer, Alex Brenton and Kelvin Clayton.
Okay, that's fine. In that case, I will have a roll call just to check that other members are in the room. So if you please respond when I call out your name. Councillor John Worth.
Yes, present.
Councillor Shane Bartlett.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Dave Bolwell.
Present, Chairman.
Alex Brenton's apologies. Kelvin Clayton's apologies. Councillor Jean Dunseith.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Mike Dyer's apologies. Councillor Sherry Jesperson.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Belinda Rideout is given apologies. And Councillor David Took.
Present, Chairman.
Fine, thank you all very much. Now, are there any declarations of interest to be made on this item, please?
Yes, Chairman.
Councillor Worth.
Yeah, it's just for a bit of clarity. I don't know whether members are all aware, but I'm the interim chairman of Winterbourne Whitechurch Parish Council while they're in the process of forming a new council. But I haven't had any conversations or been involved in anything to do with this decision, and the planning decision was made prior to my appointment as that chairman. And I just wanted to clarify that although I'm involved with the Winterbourne Whitechurch, I'm coming to this with no predetermination. Thank you.
That's fine. Well, thank you very much for making that one clear, John. Appreciated. Thank you. Okay. Right. So now we're going to move on to the item in question, item number 7 on your agenda. That's application number P/FUL/2021/02622 for construction of a solar farm and erection of an electric vehicle charging station at land south of Blandford Hill on the A354 Winterbourne Whitechurch. And the case officer here is Rob Mcdonald, who's going to do a presentation for us. So, Rob, over to you when you're ready to share your screen and take us through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to try and, can you hear me okay, first of all?
We can, yes, thank you.
I will just try and share my screen. Hopefully this will work as well.
Yes, we can see your screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. The application being brought before members today is to construct a solar farm and erect electric vehicle charging station, form vehicular access, parking, landscaping, and carry out associated works, including installation of equipment, batteries, and necessary infrastructure at land south of Blandford Hill, Winterbourne Whitechurch. Before I start the main part of the presentation, there's a couple of updates just to brief members on since the committee report was published, and that is that following further discussion between officers, it's been recommended to impose this additional condition, and I'll explain a little bit later on the rationale behind this. The condition would be recommended condition 35, and worded the area identified on drawing P2011180401 revision I and labelled dog walking area and archaeological areas shall be made available to the public at all times during the operation of the site. And the reason for it is to ensure that the public benefits of the heritage interpretation are made available to the public. This additional prescriptive condition is to the agreement of the applicants. And then the only other update is unfortunately just a couple of typos in the report in section 2, which describes the height of the CCTV columns. This should state 3 meters, not 4 meters, and this aligns with the plans submitted and the recommended condition number 32. So hopefully you can see on the slide a red star in the middle of the screen on the map. This shows the application site and the wider context of this part of the county. The site lies in close to the village of Winterbourne Whitechurch in the former North Dorset District Council area, and is along the A354 highway between Blandford and Dorchester. The site is roughly halfway between Blandford and the junction where the A354 meets the A35 dual carriageway. The application site itself comprises 37.7 hectares of agricultural land in total. The main part of the site with the service station element lies some 380 metres uphill to the northeast of the settlement boundary of the village. As you can hopefully make out from the terrain lines on this Ordnance Survey map, the main part of the site gently undulates, and I have some photos later on which demonstrate that a bit clearer. There's a long southern tail, you'll notice, to the red line, and this represents the extent of cabling which will feed the solar farm element into an existing substation about 1 kilometre to the south. There's no proposal for a new substation on the application site itself. And then there's another, hang on, let's see if I can get my pointer, that might help. There we go. There's another little branch of red line coming out there, heading west towards the village. That denotes a proposed permissive path connecting to the existing rights of way. So the proposed development essentially comprises 2 main elements. You've got the solar farm, which includes the 20 hectares of solar arrays, the battery storage area, associated infrastructure and fencing, and the underground cabling. And then you've got the electric vehicle charging station element, which includes the charging bays with the canopy above, the public convenience building, which contains a shop, cafe and toilets, the internal roads and parking, and the related equipment and infrastructure with this. The whole scheme proposed is to be in place for a temporary period of 40 years from the date of commencement. So this slide focuses on the main part of the site comprising the above ground works, which is the solar farm arrays and the electric vehicle charging station element. As I said before, 20 hectares of the site would comprise the solar farm element, and this plan hopefully gives you an idea of the extent of that, these horizontal lines, and the orientation of the arrays relative to the land. You can also see a bit clearer here this permissive path, which will link to the main part of the village. Throughout the committee report and this presentation, there are references to the southern spur, which is this parcel of land here, the western field, which is this parcel here, and the eastern field, which is, surprise, surprise, this parcel here. It's worth pointing out at this point that the initial scheme as submitted included provision for the solar arrays in the western field, but following consultee comments and discussions with the applicants, this amended plan on the screen was received, omitting arrays from this parcel and relocating these to infill parts of the eastern field and the southern spur, but without compromising the necessary buffer zones for ecology. And it's now proposed that this western field be seeded as a wildflower meadow. The access to the site would be off of the A354 and enter the site in place of an existing lay-by along this stretch of road, but effectively using this as the turn-in when approaching from the east. I'll go on to discuss this matter again a bit later on in short, but there've been no objections from the Highway Authority. The Highway Authority have confirmed that the access arrangement would be acceptable subject to what's called a Grampian condition, which for members who might not be aware is a form of pre-commencement condition requiring completion of works on land that's not controlled by the applicant. And in this instance, it's recommended condition 5 on the consent. This slide shows the site layout for the electric vehicle charging station element of the scheme, as well as the battery storage. The charging station itself would comprise a covered walkway, this part here, with the canopy, and there'll be 6 ultra rapid and 6 rapid charging points linked to a public convenience building, which is this here. and this would contain a small cafe, shop, toilets and seating area, and then there'll be an outdoor seating area on the southern side of this building as well. Surrounding the station would be additional parking areas, including some for HGVs. And then the battery storage area is here, which is closer to the highway frontage. And that would comprise 3 containers, an inverter, transformers, ancillary equipment, hard standing, CCTV, and being enclosed by a 2.5 metre perimeter fence. There's also, as you can see on the plan here, soft landscaping in and around the area, which will soften the visual impact, and this landscaping can be secured by condition. The site and extent of the charging station has been amended during the course of the application. The loop of the internal road did extend actually initially into this dog walking area as referred to, but this has actually been scaled back in light of some archaeological finds in this area, and that's shown actually by this pink and green ring, and there were some field evaluations on the site, and I'll discuss these a little bit later on. So hopefully this slide shows the main part of the site. Hereafter I've shaded it in blue, so there'll be some maps in the top left corner of some of the photos where the application site will be blue, and then there'll be some green arrows to show you where those photos were taken from. And whilst the site itself doesn't contain any designated areas, it does lie within close proximity to some and within their respective settings, and so there are some environmental sensitivities surrounding the site. And I'll go into a little bit more in detail on these later in the presentation, but for reference, of the ones that can be picked out, hopefully on this this map, there's the red shaded area, which is the Dorset area of outstanding natural beauty. You've got the black line here, which is the settlement boundary of the village. The dark blue shaded area is flood zone 3. There's some red shaded areas, hopefully you can make out little blobs, and then one here which is scheduled ancient monuments. There's some red stars in there which are listed buildings, and then we've got various pink and green lines in and around the site which are the public rights of way. So what are the key planning considerations for this particular application? Well, we consider it comprises principle of development, heritage impact, visual and landscape impact, impact on agricultural land, highways and transport impacts, residential amenity, habitats and biodiversity, flood risk impacts, and decommissioning and restoration. And I'll go through each of these in this presentation, with the top 3 in particular forming the main points of discussion during the course of the application. So in terms of principle, policies 3 and 22 of the local plan support appropriately cited renewable and low carbon energy developments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As I'm sure members are aware, the council declared a climate emergency in May 2020 and have since published a draft climate and ecological emergency strategy. And the strategy indicates that it's the council's aim to be carbon neutral by 2040. And so the proposed 15 megawatt solar farm would assist in meeting this ambition by providing enough renewable energy to power 4,000 homes each year over its 40-year lifespan. And in turn, this would displace approximately 5,700 tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions a year. In terms of economic benefits, the development would create 117 temporary jobs and 8 permanent jobs once operational. It has the added benefit of being able to feed the renewable energy on site directly into powering the adjacent electric vehicle charging station. And these public benefits must be weighed against adverse impacts. So in this instance, the latter is most likely to arise in the form of environmental impacts, namely visual, landscape and heritage. And I'll go on to discuss these in a bit more detail shortly. The electric vehicle charging station part of the development is quite niche and doesn't fit neatly into any local plan policies per se. So how is it justified as an exception required in a countryside location? Well, in the supporting statements, the applicants identified that there's an upward trajectory of electric vehicle ownership, just over 108,000 cars sold during 2020, electric vehicles that is. And new petrol and diesel cars, as we may know, will be banned from 2030. And then by this time, which is only 8 years away now, the government's ambition is for there to be at least 50% and as many as 70% of new car sales and 40% of new vans to be ultra low emission. So clearly there's going to be an exponential increase in demand over the next decade or so, and it's estimated that there'll be 400,000 public charge points will be needed throughout the UK to meet this demand. And although outside the settlement boundary, the charging station would be sited along the A354, which is a well-used and important main road in the area, and it will improve sustainable transport links between the towns and villages within Dorset, and particularly between Blandford and Dorchester, and fill a regional gap in electric vehicle infrastructure. So on the site, there's going to be 19 electric vehicle charging bays proposed in total, and that includes 6 ultra-rapid points. The facility would therefore provide a significant benefit in terms of meeting the council's ambitious vision for improving sustainable transport infrastructure in the district and wider county area. And there's also the benefit of conditions which can be imposed to restrict the intensity of use, such as opening hours and external lighting, and that will be to protect countryside character. As mentioned, the charging station would include provision for a public convenience building. The function of the charging station would differ from a traditional petrol diesel fueling station insofar as there's a longer period of time for refueling, even with the rapid chargers. The applicants have indicated the average dwell times are approximately 20 minutes, and while some drivers may opt to stay in their cars for this period of time, it's not unreasonable to propose a rest and refreshment provision on site for those that want to stretch their legs. The building itself would contain a shop. Hopefully you can see the plans here, a small cafe, as well as toilets and the seating areas. It's considered it will be commensurate in scale to the expectations of a roadside refueling station and not excessive in size for its use. As well as, sorry, I'll just clear that pointer if I can. Oh, not sure what's happened with my, there we go. Apologies for that. The added benefit of the facility is that it would not just be limited to exclusive use by those charging their vehicles on site. The provision of the shop and cafe would also be beneficial to the local community insofar as providing an additional facility to serve the local population of the village. And although 800 metres distant, it would be accessible via the off-road permissive path that's been proposed, and that will connect with the public footpath and the main part of the village. And again, like the charging station, conditions can be imposed to restrict opening hours and protect countryside character, and these have been suggested to be 7 AM to 11 PM opening hours. So one of the key considerations for this application is the impact it would have on heritage assets, both designated and non-designated, and this plan shows the main part of the site, again shaded in blue and relative to the designated heritage assets. So the red stars you can see mainly within the village itself are the listed buildings. The blue lined area with dots is the conservation area, and the red shaded bits are the scheduled ancient monuments. So there's one here, one here, one here, there's a little one there, and then a larger one here. On the site itself, there's no designated heritage assets, but it is appreciated the settings of heritage assets in the vicinity would be affected by the proposed development. As the scheme has the potential to affect the settings of assets of the highest significance, such as the scheduled ancient monuments, Historic England were consulted on the application, and they've offered their comments on the sensitive location just outside the conservation area and close to Barrows, and the deserted medieval village, which is this larger area down here. And there's a Grade 1 listed church within the village itself. But officers, including the council's conservation officer, have considered the impact on each of these assets identified and consider there to be no harm to some, including the deserted medieval village and the Grade 1 listed church. Now, despite what this plan shows, there's actually, if you can notice, a red star right at the top here, which looks like it's within the application site. And this is a Grade 2 listed milestone, which actually lies along the verge of the A354, which you can see here. And officers have assessed the impact on this and consider there to be no harm to this asset as a result of the development. In terms of conservation area, during the course of the application, it was felt that an area of concern with regards to the impact on the conservation area in this setting was distant visibility when travelling westwards along the A354. However, as this photo gives an idea of the main core of the village, including the conservation area, is primarily nestled within the valley floor and not visible upon approach from the east. There's no specific features of the conservation area that can be discerned from this point. And instead, this recognised appreciation is mainly apparent upon descent of the hill and doesn't stretch quite as far as this more elevated application site. And as such, in terms of the most sensitive relative views, the intervisibility between the site and the conservation area is very limited and not considered harmful. Officers do, however, agree that there to be less than substantial harm to 3 of the 5 scheduled ancient monuments, and those are this one here, this one here, and this one here, which form 3 barrows. Scheduled ancient monuments are designated assets, and they are of the highest significance, and great weight should be given to the conservation of these assets. As I said, the subject monuments are barrows, and they sit in an even more elevated position relative to the site and form part of a funerary landscape. And whilst there's no public footpaths to access these 2 at the bottom here, there's no clear visual indication of their presence when viewed from in and around the site. It's important to note that the aspects and consideration of the setting of these monuments does not depend on public access or whether or not specific views are identified in the scheduling entries. At the barrow close to Whitechurch Hill Barn, which is this one, is on the Heritage at Risk register due to ploughing, and to appease some of the less than substantial harm to its setting, Historic England queried whether this monument could be left as a field corner out of the arable regime to remove it from risk. However, this monument falls outside of the applicant's ownership, so unfortunately such a benefit can't be secured on this occasion. So to reduce the less than substantial harm to the setting of the barrows, amendments were made, and this included the removal of arrays from the western field, this one here, a reduction in the height and extent of the charging station element, and I'll show that on the next slide, and the introduction of interpretation boards to educate about the funerary landscape. And the plan on the right shows indicative positions of where these interpretation boards marked in the blue stars, where these would be here, here and here. Their positioning as well as design and the content of them can be secured by condition, and as per my update at the beginning of the presentation, it's also deemed necessary to recommend a condition to ensure this amenity area here, the dog walking area, which would contain 2 of the boards, be left open for the public to access. There's a gap here. So following ongoing dialogue between officers and the applicants, and with amendments to the scheme secured, it's accepted that whilst the less than substantial harm to the settings of the scheduled ancient monuments cannot be overcome, officers accept that the package of public benefits that would come from the scheme, including an increased public awareness and engagement through the interpretation boards, is significant and commensurate with the significance of the scheduled ancient monuments. And with conditions in place, the public benefits of the scheme would sufficiently outweigh the less than substantial harm caused to the settings. In light of the presence of the barrows in the vicinity and the recognition of the fact it's a funerary landscape, the county archaeologist recommended that trial trenching take place on the site during the course of the application. And upon confirming discovery of 2 ring ditches, which I think I mentioned earlier, but pink ring here and the green ring here, there were burial remains found here, and the scheme was amended during the course of the application to shift the charging station area away from this area. I think I mentioned that at the beginning, and to leave this as an amenity space in order to preserve the archaeology and the newly found non-designated heritage assets. So in addition to the scheduled barrows, the interpretation boards can also be supplemented by information about these non-designated archaeological finds, which would otherwise not be obvious for members of the public. Before I move on to discuss the visual and landscape impact of the development, I think it's important just to remind members of how the development would be designed, the charging station in particular. Here are the revised elevation drawings of the charging station as the height, length and roof form of the building and detached canopy walkway structure was amended. And you can see actually that there's a dashed black line here which showed the initial proposals. The whole length has been reduced to 104.5 metres, and there's now a flat roof reduced in height from 5 metres down to 3.5. You can probably get an idea, but the external walls of the building will be clad in vertical timber boards, and what you can't see from this plan is that it will actually sit under a green roof. The canopy roof of the charging bay area is intended to be glazed, and we can condition, or it's recommended by officers, that the exact materials and finish used for the charging station can be secured by condition prior to its construction. And then once again, this is the revised extent of the solar farm and how it would relate with the charging station here. So here's the solar farm extent and charging station. The arrays themselves would stand no more than 3 metres in height above ground level, and they'd be up to 60 metres in length at their widest points, and they'd be spaced apart by at least 4.5 metres. And here are the various plans for the ancillary structures relating to the solar farm and the battery storage area. The precise locations for some of these, such as the transformers and inverters, have not been indicated on plans submitted, but owing to their scale relative to the whole development, it's considered acceptable to require this information by condition. So in terms of the visual and landscape impact, the application site is some 300 metres from the boundary of the Dorset Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty at its nearest point. Paragraph 176 of the National Planning Policy Framework has been updated to include the consideration of setting of AONBs, and that it states development within the AONB setting should be sensitively located and designed to avoid or minimise adverse impacts on the designated areas. So I'm now just going to provide a series of photos taken from what have been considered by officers the most sensitive viewpoints. As the map in the top left indicates, hopefully you can make that out. This viewpoint is within the area of outstanding natural beauty, the red shaded area. This photo is taken from a field gate, and the only gap in the hedgerow along the eastern side of the public footpath, E3219. This is looking east towards the site. And the foreground here, you can see properties within Old Oak Way, and the position of the charging station is on the crest of the hill. It's roughly between these two houses here. You can see the adjoining western field. I'm just going to hover it above, or actually just below is probably useful. There's the western field there, if you can make that out. So that is discernible. But obviously prior to the amendment, you would have definitely seen some arrays from this point, but with the emission, you're not going to see any of the solar farm development. But it might be possible to see top of the battery storage enclosure and the charging station element from here, but sympathetic planting is proposed to provide some screening and soften the impact over time. This viewpoint is on more elevated land relative to the previous photo, and again it's within the area of outstanding natural beauty. It's taken from footpath E3223 this time, and it's just before this footpath reaches what's called Weston's Woods, and again looking east towards the site. You can make out the western field a little bit clearer here because you're higher up. And the AONB team recognise in their comments that this footpath would provide a clear view of the site from out of the designated area. And even with revisions, they've maintained some concern with regard to the charging station element in particular, and that it would introduce what they describe as a discordant feature into the setting of the AONB. The actual parcel of land within which the charging station would be sited can't be clearly identified from here. There's a slither, it's hard to make out, there's a slither of brown land just on the horizon here. There's a grouping of trees here, and there's a slither of brown land just next to it. This is actually the field that joins to the eastern field, so it's not part of the application site, and it's close to Whitechurch Hill Barn. But nonetheless, owing to the relative spot points from this location, there may be some limited sight of the battery storage and the charging station from here, especially shortly after construction and before the vegetation matures and becomes established. So the visual and landscape harm from within the AONB, looking out of it towards the application site, and this photo probably best demonstrates that. would be limited, and officers consider that it could be suitably mitigated by a series of conditions, including the soft landscaping scheme. So this viewpoint is just outside the area of outstanding natural beauty. It's from footpath E32-1, having just emerged from a copse called the Clump. It's looking southeast towards the site. Handily, you can just make out a couple of HGVs driving past, and from what was observed, the existing hedgerows actually provide a pretty good degree of screening. At present, they were hidden from view as they were coming along this section here. There are a few gaps, however, and this would allow clearer sight of the proposal, and to this end, more planting and soft landscaping is proposed and can be conditioned to mitigate the visual impact from this viewpoint, and over time the site would be well screened from this viewpoint without significantly compromising the landscape character. So handily, the applicants have provided some artistic impressions, and this is one from the previous photo from that viewpoint, and this shows the amended scheme, and this is after year 1 of planting growth. So you will be able to make out the battery storage area here, which is enclosed by fencing, and the charging station just behind it with the canopy sort of dropping away as this land rises up. And then this is the visual from year 5 of planting growth, suggesting that there'll be some more assimilation of the development into the setting. Officers consider that the visual and landscape impact from this position outside of the A and B at relatively close proximity could be suitably mitigated. So the next set of photos are taken from footpath E32-6, which is the public footpath that skirts along the southern part of the site. This footpath is where the most obvious visual impact of the development can be appreciated. There are points where only parts of the whole development would be visible, but then there are others where the whole development would be. And this is the first point where the site would become apparent, and from here you'd be able to see the tip of the southern spur. So that is this parcel here. You can also see how the footpath rises up the topography up towards White Church Hill Barn, which is further east up here. So slightly further east along the footpath, and would now allow, as you see, full view of the arrays in the southern spur, which is this parcel here, and you can now see the eastern field, which is this section here. I mentioned earlier, a couple of slides ago, about the brown slither of field you could see from the AONB looking across. That's actually this parcel of land here, so you can get a bit of an idea of how the topography within the site undulates, and this is not within the application site area. Some more visuals from the applicants provided, similar to the photo just before. This is after year 1, so you will see the arrays clearly visible at close quarters from this footpath, even after a year of growth. But then it's suggested that after 5 years, and again, we can control the landscaping by condition, the arrays would be completely screened by the proposed planting. Again, further east along the same footpath, it's at this point you can now just make out the field boundary between the eastern field and the parcel within which the charging station would be sited. It's just here. So this is the start of the parcel with the charging station in. It's this section of footpath you can see sits below the levels of the site mostly, and the levels rise up towards the A354, and you can see how the site undulates. It sort of almost interlocks from here, and because of the lay of the land, the proposed heights of the development, and the presence of solar arrays in the foreground, sight of the charging station is unlikely to be achievable from this point. There's no visuals, unfortunately. I mentioned in the committee report there's a narrow section of footpath which is enclosed with hedgerows on either side, and limits visibility of the site to just the southernmost tip of the solar arrays in the southern spur, and this is that photo. This is from that position, so the extent of the site would be around about here. And then this photo is at the top of the hill relative to the last photo, and from what I've referred to in the committee report as the kink in the footpath. And it's this point that allows the most expansive view of the whole site. You can from here make out the Dorset area of outstanding natural beauty landscape in the background. There's features you can pick out such as Weston's Wood, which is in this sort of region here. You can make some trees out there. And there's also the clump, which I mentioned as well, which are this band of trees here. And just to make it clear, this is the southern spur. This is the parcel of land where the charging station would be sited, and then this is the eastern field. And then this is a bit further up from the kink, and it is a panoramic shot of the whole site. Both landscape officers recognise the degree of visual harm and landscape harm and adverse effect on this public right of way. And this we consider to be the most obvious point within the local setting and the most obvious point for identifying that impact. But whilst it's recognised the development would not directly obscure views into the AONB and the solar farm arrays in the eastern field would have a lower effect on the setting of the AONB, the appreciation of its setting would be interrupted undoubtedly by the fundamental change in the way the foreground would be perceived as a result of the development as a whole. So clearly any solar farm proposal is going to be considered at odds with existing landscape character by just their very nature and comparatively extensive scale. But overall, it's recognised that it would not be possible for the development to avoid harm in terms of visual impact within the rural setting and wider landscape, including the setting of the Dorset area of outstanding natural beauty. However, the applicants have offered some positive soft landscaping solutions, such as additional tree copses that would not be significantly out of keeping with the landscape character area, as well as new and bolstered hedgerows. This is the landscaping plan I've got up on the screen here, so you can see little sort of copse here, and then along the eastern side of the southern spur, in and around the charging station, and along the southern part here of the eastern field. And whilst these would not fully screen the whole development, the additional soft landscaping would assist in mitigating this visual impact, as well as providing ecological enhancements. The strategy of the soft landscaping can be secured and controlled by condition, which is recommended by the council's senior landscape officer. So the identified harm in terms of landscape needs to be weighed in the overall planning balance and against the public benefits the scheme would bring. I'm just going to move on to the other sort of issues now, the other key considerations. There will be loss of agricultural land as a result of the development. The applicants have submitted an assessment of the agricultural land grading across the main application site, and this identified, as you can see on the plan here, 80% of the land would be grade 3A and the remaining 20% grade 3B. And grade 3A is described as the best and most versatile land, and development on such land therefore needs to be carefully considered. But in the planning statement, the applicants do explain that the family that's farmed the application site for many years has confirmed that the parcels comprising the site are inherently less productive from agricultural perspective than most other areas within the farming unit, and the most elevated areas where the site is located have shallow soils and historically were downed and used for non-intensive sheep grazing. The lower areas beyond the red line generally have a deeper soil layer and they're better suited to more intensive farming and arable farming. As mentioned earlier before, during the course of the application, the extent of solar arrays has been removed from the western field, and that's almost entirely grade 3A land. So this would be left as a wildflower meadow, and therefore this has reduced the extent of agricultural land lost as a result of the development. So the development would not avoid the best and most versatile agricultural land, but officers consider the benefits of the scheme as a whole would outweigh the loss of this land for the duration of the scheme, and conditions can be imposed regarding and controlling decommissioning and the restoration of the land. As I mentioned earlier, the access would be off the A354, enter the site from an existing lay-by. There's no objections from the Highway Authority in terms of highway safety and transport impacts. They've recommended some conditions, including the Grampian one I mentioned earlier. Visibility displays have been deemed appropriate, and the parking provision is also appropriate. Just going to bring up the site plan again. It's useful to see how the site relates to the nearest neighbouring properties to the southwest down within the village. The public convenience building forming part of the charging station element would be about 650 metres from the nearest neighbour. There's enough separation to not have issues with overbearingness, loss of light or loss of outlook. The applicants provided an initial noise assessment based on worst case scenario, and this concluded that occupants of nearby properties would not be unacceptably affected by levels of noise generated from the site, and this has been accepted by the council's environmental health team. The environmental health team have recommended that a revisited noise report be submitted by condition once the actual plant installation information is known, and this is a belt and braces approach, and the applicant is accepting of this condition. And the main issues in terms of noise are likely to be limited to the construction and decommissioning phases, but we can impose conditions relating to construction traffic management plan and a decommissioning method statement, and that can help control this impact. So overall, officers consider the impact on neighbours.
We've lost you. We've lost you there momentarily, Rob.
Oh,
you froze for a couple of minutes, 30 seconds.
How do I? Can you still see my presentation?
Yes, yeah, can see that. 39, slide 39, biodiversity.
Which part did you lose me?
Froze that. So overall was the last words we heard.
Overall,
yeah,
is that on this slide? Right,
yep.
Okay, let me just see. Right, that was, you only missed I think about 2 or 3 seconds. Sorry, but I don't know what's happened with the connection there, but hopefully let me know if it happens again. Sorry about that. So yeah, that was just to say overall officers consider the impact on neighbouring amenity would be acceptable. The biodiversity, the site does not lie within any statutory designated sites. A landscape and ecological management plan has been submitted and signed and approved by the council's natural environment team, and this includes mitigation and enhancement measures, including provision of 719 native hedgerow, new tree copses, existing hedgerows gapping up, provision of bat, bird and dormouse boxes around the site, and the wildflower meadow in the western field, and this LEM can be conditioned to ensure that any potential adverse impacts on local wildlife and habitats can be satisfactorily mitigated and enhanced. The main part of the site is within flood zone 1, so there's no issues in this regard. I mentioned right at the beginning of the presentation there's an underground cable which would cross flood zone 3 and the River Winterbourne to connect with the existing substation a kilometre to the south. A flood risk assessment was submitted, and this confirms that the crossing of the watercourse will be installed using directional drill techniques, and the grid connection works within the vicinity of the main river, and the flood zones will be subject to an environmental permit with the Environment Agency, which on that point there were no comments received from the Environment Agency on the application. The lead local flood authority were consulted on the application and have no objections subject to conditions, and then details of the foul drainage can be secured by condition. And then finally, in terms of decommissioning and restoration, it's proposed for the scheme to be in situ for a period of 40 years, after which the entirety of the site will be fully decommissioned and all of the land, with the exception of the additional soft landscaping planted, restored back to agricultural land. There was no statements or reports provided specifically about this, but it's now fairly standard practice for decommissioning the decommissioning process to be controlled by a condition requiring agreement of details towards the end of the scheme's lifetime to ensure that the proposed details are appropriate at the actual time of decommissioning. So just to summarise, officers recognise that the extent of the development in a sensitive location would not be able to avoid the less than substantial harm caused to scheduled ancient monuments in the vicinity of the site, nor completely avoid harm in terms of visual impact within the rural setting and wider landscape, including the setting of the Dorset Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. And the development would also result in the loss of grade 3 agricultural land, even if this is not deemed to be as valuable as graded. However, the public benefits of the scheme would be substantial and clear. The solar farm would power 4,000 homes a year for 40 years, displacing 5,700 tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions every year. The charging station would complement the solar farm and play a role towards tackling climate change and assist towards the council's aim to be carbon neutral by 2040. There'd be 117 temporary jobs and 8 permanent jobs from the development. The development will be sited along a main A road and fill a regional gap in electric vehicle infrastructure. The public convenience facilities on site would provide an additional service for the local community with connection into the village for walkable access. As recognition and identification of the funerary landscape and presence of both designated and non-designated heritage assets in the local area will be highlighted to the public through interpretation on site, and on-site archaeology can be preserved. A substantial number of new native species, trees and hedgerows would be planted to provide both visual and ecological enhancements in addition to mitigation and enhancement for protected species in the local area. There'll be no harm caused to neighbouring amenity and highway safety, and there'll be no flooding issues. So officers consider there are significant public benefits to the scheme as a whole, and these would outweigh the harm identified, and as such the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to a number of conditions detailed in section 11 of the committee report and the additional conditions stated at the beginning of the presentation. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. A very comprehensive coverage. Thank you for that. Hannah, did you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry to interrupt. Just reviewing the conditions. Rob mentioned the permissive path that would be created between the village and the site. We haven't actually suggested a planning condition that this is provided, and if members are might want to just consider potentially adding an additional condition that requires the provision of the permissive footpath prior to the service building being used, and that would ensure that those benefits that Rob's highlighted can definitely be secured, because I think the difference between not having the footpath and having it is the easy access to that facility from the village, and you wouldn't be able to walk along the road there with the speed of traffic and the lack of footpath. So just a potentially an additional condition added to the list of conditions that requires that provision, Chair. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for that. That's useful, helpful information. Thank you. Thanks very much. Right, well, we've got a number of representations here. So once again, we've got Nicola Holdsworth with us to read them out. So when you're ready, Nicola, off you go.
Okay. Objection 1 from Ian Bruce. This planning application must be rejected despite the solar park component having merit and my full support. The applicant must be asked to resubmit their proposals, which should be separated into 3 standalone components in order to identify which of these are contingent. 1, solar park. 2, energy storage and vehicle battery charging facility. 3, shop, cafe, rest area, toilets. The importance of promoting renewable energy production and vehicle battery charging infrastructure cannot be overstated, but this should not be at any cost. The applicant has failed to provide a compelling case to co-locate these 3 distinct components at this isolated and valuable greenfield site. The renewable energy generated by the solar park can be easily and cost-effectively transported and distributed with minimum losses, utilising the local electricity distribution network to which it will be connected and to which all our homes and businesses are connected. This will allow the renewable energy generated by the solar park to be used to supply vehicle battery charging facilities and for many other uses, including storage, at existing and more appropriate locations in the county, e.g. at fuel stations and supermarkets in or near to our local towns, e.g. Blandford, Dorchester, Wareham, etc. Indeed, the fully interconnected electricity distribution network can be used to transfer the renewable energy to virtually any and every part of our region, providing a huge number of choices for locating the energy storage and vehicle charging facilities. It's Berger's belief that a valuable remote rural site must be destroyed when there are so many existing and underused brownfield sites currently available, including prime locations adjacent to the primary trunk road system. Locating vehicle battery charging infrastructure close to existing retail and leisure facilities in or near to Dorset's market towns would have the additional benefit of attracting passing visitors to make good use of local amenities while waiting, often 30 minutes or a lot more, for their vehicle batteries to be charged. For example, local shops, restaurants, hotels and pubs would all benefit from the increased passing trade, while local residents without home charging facilities, i.e. having only on-street parking, would also be able to take advantage of the facilities. Many potential brownfield locations are already used for other purposes and benefit from services such as good road access, mains drainage, street lighting and the personal safety and security that comes from being located in or near existing urban public spaces. Sadly, making use of an isolated rural location after dark to charge vehicle batteries is an open invitation to criminals and those who might want to do us harm. This is particularly the case for vulnerable people travelling on their own. Please reject this application. Objection 2, Mr. Julian Turner. The officer's recommendation to accept is simply not supported by the sheer weight of evidence within his excellent and comprehensive report concerning the disbenefits of the proposal. In particular, the report states that wider benefits can be given substantial weight in the planning process, which conflicts also with acknowledgement that the application makes only a relatively small contribution to the very ambitious 2040 council targets, which it is duly noted are still in draft form. This mismatch of logic and tenuous basis of evidence defies sound principles of development control and would bring the whole planning process into disrespect if accepted. It offends the intellect and it will be viewed accordingly by the wider public if accepted. This is support letter 1 from Angela Ercan. I am writing this statement in support of the proposed Eco Hub, which is hopefully being built near Winterbourne Whitechurch, Dorset. I do live in the village and cannot see any reason why it shouldn't be built. We have to think of the future of our children and grandchildren who will be more likely to use the hubs, electric chargers and relax while waiting in the cafe. As a society, we must now think of greener ways of protecting the planet for future generations. This Eco Hub is one way we can do that locally. Different points were raised at the local meeting, which were answered by the spokesman from Naturalists. Points raised were extra traffic, but I can see that happening. But I can't see that happening. But we do know EV cars are quieter, and you're not going to suffer pollution like you would with petrol or diesel cars. Providing employment, I think 8 people would be great for local people. Even as I don't have an electric car, the thought of a cafe and shop would be a great asset to the village, as it is also in walking distance. It can only be a positive move for Dorset. We live in Dorset in a tourist area, not far from beaches and our beautiful Durdle Door and Lulworth. From a tourist point of view, what a lovely location to stop, recharge and relax in the cafe. Thank you for listening. Support 2, Tony Senior. Regarding the proposed Eco Hub and solar farm on Blandford Hill next to the A354 near Winterbourne Whitechurch, I, as someone who would be greatly affected, by this proposal. I think it was one of the best ideas I've heard in a long time. I live on Lady Bailey Park. I do believe that this installation would be and is vital to the future infrastructure of Dorset and the local area of Blandford, and the current lack of any great amount of chargers in and around Blandford. It seems that there is opposition to the site in the local area. I cannot see why, as in 8 years, almost all households will have an electric vehicle and not everyone can have or afford a home charger. I have heard comments in the village about this proposal, most of which at best are ill-informed and at worst are rubbish and amount to not in my backyard. In conclusion, I can only say I am not alone, that the quicker we get this, the better, so that I can have an EV. Sorry about that. Support 3 from Martin Gleeden. I was a councillor for Winterbourne Whitechurch Parish Council. However, I am no longer a councillor and wish to comment in support of the application. The proposed Eco Hub will have little detrimental effect to Winterbourne Whitechurch, but will instead provide several benefits. Very few of the properties in the village and will have the facility for charging an electric vehicle. And despite the country moving towards almost fully electric in the next 10 years, yes, there will be limited charging facilities in Blandford Forum and Bear Regis, but none of these would be but none of these would be the high-speed charging points proposed by naturalists. The hub may also provide some local employment opportunities which currently don't exist in a village with a stagnant economy. The land proposed for construction of the hub doesn't produce a significant income for the farmer, and as most farmers in the area are suffering from rising costs, loss of EU payments, etc., the long-term viability of agriculture as the main land use around the village is in question. Without the income to the landowner this hub will provide, it is possible that the land will have to be sold for development, changing the identity of the village forever and not just the proposed lifespan of the hub. As a local historian and an archaeologist, I am aware of the findings of the magnetometer survey, heritage report and various test excavations on the proposed site, and their conclusions agree with my findings from field walking and historical research, particularly on the Deverell-Rimbury culture, which includes all local barrows and cemetery complexes. There is nothing historical on the site which would be affected by construction, and nothing which isn't duplicated on almost every part of the North Down. English Heritage raised objections based in insufficient local knowledge. 4 of the 7 barrows which formerly ran along North Down have been ploughed out, leaving only 3, the nearest to the site also having suffered plough damage. The other historical sites they mention cannot be seen or said to be impacted by the site in any way. The site is outside the AONB and a nearby large industrial egg packing plant, now being converted to a storage facility, obviously has more visual impact than the site, which is going to be surrounded by trees and hedgerows and will, in the main, not be visible from the village. Statistics show a very low incidence of accidents on the A354 approaches to Winterbourne Whitechurch, unlike the junctions to Kingston and at Thornicombe. Both these accident-prone junctions are wide and have excellent visibility. There's no reason to assume the entrance to the hub will significantly increase accident rates or cause a traffic hazard. Thank you.
Right, thank you for those. Now, we don't have anything from a town and parish or the ward councillor, who is Emma Parker. So we finish off here with the applicant statement.
Okay. Good afternoon. Naturalist is proud to present this first of its kind development in Dorset. The Blandford Hill Eco Club, if approved, would significantly increase renewable energy generation in the country, help tackle Dorset Council's climate emergency, and support and encourage the uptake of electric vehicles. The solar panels will provide renewable electricity equivalent to the needs of around 4,000 typical UK homes per year. The project would also bring new, modern and reliable electric vehicle charging infrastructure to the country, plugging a regional gap for this type of facility. The location is ideal, being adjacent to a busy A road with safe access, well set back from the residences, and critically with a nearby grid connection. The UK government's ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars is less than 8 years away. However, progress towards low carbon electric vehicle future is a mixed picture. As the Chief Executive of the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders said earlier this month, the undeniable bright spot is the growth in electric car uptake. The biggest obstacle to our shared net zero ambitions is not product availability, however, but cost and charging infrastructure. The project before you would significantly increase both the quantity and quality of public electric vehicle charging in Dorset. By providing at least a dozen rapid and ultra rapid chargers, it would double the number of this type of charger currently on the A354 between Salisbury and Weymouth. With a further 7 fast chargers, this project would decisively plug a public charging gap. It would also provide for the first time on this stretch of road modern ultra rapid charging capabilities that can add 100 miles of range every 6 minutes. Naturalist is delighted that this exciting project has attracted genuine interest and support from the local community, including the parish council and local businesses. The hub will provide employment opportunities during construction and operation and has the support of the Dorset LEP. We are pleased to note the recommendation for approval from your officers and hope that you too will support this scheme and help ensure that rural Dorset does not fall behind as transport in the UK rapidly moves to a zero carbon electric future. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Nikki, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, Rob, is there anything you want to respond to in what you heard there thus far?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just come back on just a couple of things really from the objections we had, and just really to say that as the council we have to assess planning applications based on what's been submitted and what's before us, and in this instance it's forms a package of development, and in terms of along the particular transport route, I'm not aware of any other brownfield sites which would be more appropriate to accommodate the full extent of the development proposed, and it's not uncommon to have solar farms installed in countryside locations anyway, often on greenfield agricultural land. And then while the proposal is a substantial temporary period of 40 years, it's not permanent. So the whole site, we can control the right condition. It can be decommissioned in its entirety and restored once that time has expired. And then just to come back on the point on the strategy, that is in draft form, and at this stage, I think I mentioned in the report, there's little weight given to it at the moment, but I think it is a material consideration nonetheless, as it sets out the council's ambitions regarding tackling climate change, and this development goes to the very heart of that. We've also got, when we look at the fact that the development plan prevails, we've got policies 3 and 22 of the local plan, and these both support proposals for renewable energy development in principle. I think that's all the comments I had on those. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I think you've covered the most points that come out of those. Thank you. Okay, members' questions, and the first one I've got is Councillor Jesperson. Sherry, you've got 2 questions, you said.
I have, thank you very much, and then I'd like to come back and comment later. So my first question then is with regard, you mentioned that there, have I frozen? No, good. You mentioned that there was provision for HGVs. Can I just check that the charging station is also got provision for motorhomes, because Dorset has form on not being as hospitable to motorhomes as some other counties. So have we included motorhomes in that?
No, that wasn't explicitly. Thank you for your question, Councillor. That was I don't recall that being explicitly made clear. Motorhomes in particular. There's parking areas. I'll see if I can get. Hopefully, you can still see the presentation, and hopefully, I can go through this, and then I can show you the site plan. So I'm going to have to go back quite far. Where is it? Here's the sort of pull-in bits for the HGVs. I suppose you could probably fit mobile caravans on there as well. Again, there's another space here. Then there's all these pull-in areas here, depending on the size of the caravan, I suppose, if that's what you meant.
Well, yes, but motorhomes. Yes, caravans even worse. But motorhomes, I'm thinking of. We hope that within less than 40 years, we will have electric motorhomes as well as electric cars. So look, probably the question has come too late. We will trust that the company that's doing it know their business well enough to know that motorhomes and caravans are a big part of the tourist trade, and that they will want to, if this facility is there, they will want to use it. So yes, it's yes, okay. My second question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, is maintenance of the dog walking area. Again, I'm sure that the current applicants have every intention of maintaining it very nicely, but 40 years is a long time and it could change hands. And I can just foresee a worst case scenario where it turns into a nasty, unkept, scrubby bit of land on the edge of the village because nobody's maintaining it. So have we conditioned anything about maintaining that area as in a state that it's usable by the public? And if not, could we? You know, I'm sure, as I say, it's bound to be their intention, but 40 years is a long time.
Yeah, we haven't specifically got a sort of prescriptive condition about that, but we can probably have that wrapped up within the landscaping conditions, which would require, you know, maintenance certainly for the first 5 years anyway. But we could probably reword that or put something in there which, for this particular area, if that is a concern, for that to be for the duration of the 40 years that it's in place, and yeah. You know, I'm sure hopefully the applicants would agree to that. But I agree, yeah, that is a valid concern, Councillor, yeah.
Yes, if others agree, I would like to see that condition in there just for the future. Thank you very much. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Jesperson's absolutely right, because 5 years is nothing, and it's the longer term where these issues arise, and they cause a bit of discontent if these things are left unattended. So that would be a good one to include if we proceed in a positive way. Okay, next I've got Councillor Bartlett. Shane.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. It was a really good presentation. I'm just wondering, on page 109, where it says highway and transport impacts, judging by the photo, it appears to be quite a fast road. I think mention was made that the traffic speed limit was quite fast, but I didn't see anything in that highway and transport impacts about the volume of traffic on this road, and also, do I get the impression that the entrance to it is sort of approaching the brow of a hill? And I just wondered what although it says that the condition 19 is the visibility display areas for highway safety, is there anything in there about warning signs on the highway about that there is going to be a right-hand turn onto the site? And is anything going to be done about the speed in this particular area or not?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. There was a travel plan, I believe, submitted with this, which has been reviewed by the Highway Authority. They've looked at everything that's been submitted to do with highways, including the new access, and they've offered no objections subject to the conditions. So from gathering from that, it would seem that everything is fine here in terms of safety. There's not going to be a severe impact on highway safety. So on that basis, I think we're happy that everything's been looked at and scrutinised. I'm not sure if Steve is actually part of this committee. If he is, then he might be able to contribute. But
no, he's not on this call,
okay.
As far as I know. No.
Okay, fine.
Hannah, you're confirming that, are you? Yeah.
I am, Chair, thank you. Yes, Rob just made the point that a full transport statement was submitted. The Highway Authority officer would have reviewed that. It would have had information about the amount of traffic used in the site and the locality. And as Rob's pointed out, the Highway Authority's raised no concern with that, provided there's some conditions attached. So we don't, I know it is at the brow of the hill, you're right, but there's adequate visibility there, Councillor, thank you for raising it, to make the development safe for people entering and exiting the site. And that would have taken account of the traffic speeds there and the volumes of traffic using the site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it, Shane? Yep, okay.
For now, Chairman, I'll come back later, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Took, David.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. I think it was Hannah mentioned about the footpath and whether it should be conditioned, because I can't see in the application that the footpath is included, but that would certainly help make it much more useful for local people. And I'm just wondering if it's possible for us to put a condition on that footpath should be present. And my other question is regarding the use of agricultural land. My understanding, and I think it's covered in somewhere in the report, is that sheep grazing within solar farms is quite common. And if that's the use that it's currently within the land, then will that continue? Is that the intention that sheep will continue to graze and help keep the grass and the weeds down underneath the panels? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Regarding the permissive path, I've got hopefully you can see there, that's the red line area for the application site, and thankfully it does include that permissive path as part of the red line. So we do have some control over that. We can put conditions on regarding that. Coming back about the sheep grazing, I think it's anecdotally quite common for sheep to be grazing. I'm just trying to recall whether I have ever seen it happen on the ground when I've seen solar farms, and I don't think I have, but I think it does happen, and it can be achievable. And I don't think we can impose any conditions though, obviously saying they must continue grazing sheep, but it will remain agricultural in between the panels. So there's an opportunity there for some albeit limited agricultural activities between them, and sheep grazing is apparently one of those. So ultimately it'd be down to the landowner as to what they do, but after the 40 years it will then go back to a full site of agricultural use. Does that answer your question? Okay,
it does, and I'm aware of a number of studies and reports and articles about sheep grazing being beneficial to solar farms.
Yeah.
But thank you. I think that answers the two questions.
Yeah.
I may come back further with a comment.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we take your point about sheep, but there's other perhaps benefits that come out of it, because you get an increase in the other biodiversity under these panels where there's less other activity. So it isn't all about sheep, and I've never seen sheep underneath these things either. But perhaps they are under there and we can't see them. But there are benefits in terms of extra wildflower growth.
Half a dozen reports from all sorts of different sources, but never mind.
Yeah.
All right.
That's for another day, David. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. Before I go on to members' comments, I've got a couple of questions as well, please, Rob. First one relates a little bit to what Councillor Jesperson was saying. On the slide where you're showing the close-up of the layout of the facility, back one, it wasn't numbered, that one, yeah, number 7, yeah. Where exactly is the vehicle parking? Not for charging, because that's under the canopy, obviously. Where is the actual vehicle parking for cars and HGVs, please, on that?
There is a bank along here. Can you still see the pointer? Okay.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, it's a bank along here. So this is the kind of the main where this is just going to be all charging the ultra rapid and rapid ones. This is, you can see actually just about on the plan, there's like little boxes there. I'm guessing those are going to be charging points as well. So the charging points will be not just under the canopy, but in amongst these parking areas as well. So there's a few there. There's also some accessibility exclusive ones there as well. There's a bit more parking here, and then there's a little bit more here, and that equates to 27 parking spaces in total, from what I gather. And then that's obviously we've got the larger spaces here for HGVs or, you know, mobile caravans, the larger vehicles.
Yes, okay. Well, I'm glad you did point that out, because I was concerned that the parking would be only for those using the charger, and if somebody else came in and wasn't using the charger, they'd take up the space. But that's presumably won't happen, or there'll be measures in place to prevent that. Okay, thank you. The next one is back on this footpath one again. Where exactly is it? I know it's connecting the village, but is it on the roadside, or is it protected from the roadside if it goes ahead?
Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified that. It's not on the roadside, it's within the field, so you won't be walking along the verge, or there's not provision for a new footway along that highway. It's going to be within the safety of the field that drops down here, and then it connects with a public footpath which starts here. I think there's a field gate from memory, and then there's a public footpath that runs this way, and then another one parallel about here. So you could, from the main village here, you could walk up the hill. There's a little kind of some backland development here, and there's like a gravel track, and then you meet the permissive path at that point, which will take you up through the meadow and through the dog walking area up to the main part of the site.
And with this footpath, if it's adopted and it goes with the application, if it's granted, would there be a condition about keeping it maintained? Because it won't be our countryside team, it'll be presumably the applicant to keep.
Yeah, because it wouldn't be an adopted public right of way. We'd have to, because that would be covered by a different act in terms of obstruction and maintenance. We would have to word the condition in a way that would secure that. So yes, we would have to be robust in that sense and ensure it's maintained, and perhaps even details of whether the material, because it could be everything from just a mowed grass to something a bit more formal. So we could word it in a way that would require the details of the surface, keeping it clear, not obstructing it, and making sure we've got that secured, especially as it goes uphill.
I think that is important to have that going forward, so we can control the condition of it as it goes forward. Thank you. And the last one, sorry to labour on this, but this is an old chestnut of mine, is the lighting. Under the old dark skies issue, what detail have we got on the lighting, both in the centre, where the units are, and the actual charging panels?
Yeah, we've imposed a condition regarding the lighting strategy in particular, so we can have some control over that. We've spoken with the applicant in terms of, we're looking for the lights to be switched off when the premises is closed. So everything between 11 PM and 7 AM, the site will be shut, all the lights off. So we can control that, and we can make sure with the condition that it's appropriate intensity, the angle of the lights, the positions of them, etc. We've got some control over that to make sure it's not going to affect any dark skies or the countryside character, and of course biodiversity.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Okay, I think I've exhausted my questions, but thank you. Now I've got, I thought we'd finish with members' questions, but I've got John Worth and Sherry Jesperson wanted to make comment, but Shane Bartlett's come back in with a question. So are the two of you happy if I let Shane have this question, and then we move on to comments and discussion?
Yeah, I'm happy if Shane asks this question. I've also now generated a question in my mind listening to what's just been said. So, but I'll let Shane have the floor, and then I can do my questions and comments together. And
Sherry?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, over to you then, Shane.
Thank you, Chairman. I was really pleased to see in the plan that there's provision for 3 HGV spaces. which was really good. We have a lack of places and areas for lorries to park up, and the continent seem to do this so much better than we do, providing facilities for drivers. And obviously the cafe area that you've got that was in your plans, I'm sorry I didn't make a note of the plan, but I just wondered whether there was shower facilities included in that as well. And I see the toilets, but whether there was any shower provision, because it's not just HGV drivers, obviously there's reps as well. I don't know whether that can be made as a planning condition at this late stage or not, or what the thinking from officers is on that.
I don't think, looking at the plans now, I don't think there is for members of the public. I think there might be for staff, just looking at that floor plan in this area here changing. I'm guessing that could incorporate a shower. Here's the public toilet area here. It doesn't look like there's any shower provision. I'm just trying to think of an instance when I've been somewhere similar where there has been showers, but I'm sure there must be. I don't think it's anything we can kind of stipulate by condition. It'll be down to I suppose the applicants as to whether they think that's a necessary provision, but you know, public toilets is reasonable. I haven't got any more comments on that, I'm afraid.
Just okay, thank you. Through you, Chairman. As I said previously, I think, as you're aware, I come from a haulage family, had a haulage business within the family. Provision for HGV drivers on the continent is far better in this country, and we've seen in the media the shortage there is of HGV drivers, and part of that is because of the lack of facilities that provided for HGV drivers in this country. Whether the officers would be able to discussion with the applicant about that provision on this site would be really beneficial to those drivers.
I think we can probably maybe put that not as a condition, but maybe an informative note, because we are where we are. We've got this application as it stands, and otherwise it would mean going back to the drawing board. So maybe an informative. I think the point again is extremely well made, by the way, because it is a growing concern for these drivers now, part of the recruitment process. This would help it. So there's something maybe we can put an informative note in. I don't know how you feel about that, Rob.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think I was going to say with a condition, I don't think it would meet all the 6 tests of conditions, so I don't think we couldn't condition it, but certainly an informative would be advisable, especially based on Councillor Bartlett's experience. So it's first hand. So yeah, I think we can put that on. I might just double check with Hannah and Mike whether that's appropriate, if I may.
Yeah, carry on.
Is Mike there?
Yes. Sorry, Rob. Yeah.
Sorry, Mike.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. Yeah, I agree with what Rob's advised on this. Is that it would be difficult for us to condition it. An informative is fine, because I think we can have that discussion with the applicants, and it's not beyond the realm of the scope of an applicant to amend the internal layout without even needing planning permission at a future date, if they so wish to put in. If they're getting requests from HGV drivers or haulage companies that actually it would be beneficial, and this is a useful site on a main road for them, they may find actually there's some merit in providing that. But I suppose we have to be a bit wary of the scale of these facilities. They're relatively modest. They're there to serve, in effect, the vehicles that would be stopping to charge their vehicles, to provide that kind of facility, as well as for the local village. So if it's a major service station on a motorway, there might be a different level of demand or expectation than there would be for something of this scale located in this particular position. But I don't see that there would be any harm at all in us putting that on as an informative, and even to raise that with the applicant so that they're aware, and it's something that I'm sure they could keep under review depending on the nature of demand that they're experiencing for the facilities.
Good, thank you very much. Okay,
thank
Shane.
You, Chairman. Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Right now, John Worth and Sherry Jesperson have waited very patiently, and members keep coming in wanting more questions, and David Took's coming in with a question. Well, I'm not going to take sides, but I'm going to go back. John Worth, you have been patient, so would you like to come in with your comment, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was to say there is a question coming first, which is that there is restricted hours for the site. Is it going to be shut outside those hours? And that will generate a further comment on that answer. Thank you.
Yes, in short, yes, and that's every day as well. So Monday to Monday, or whatever day of the week you want to start it on. So everything between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. the premises will be closed.
Will that be that the site will be secured so no vehicles can enter or exit the site?
That is a good question, and I think there's a condition imposed by highways about gates and no gates, so I don't think it's not going to be a gated compound, so to speak. So it's possible that people would be able to park in there out of hours, but it won't be lit and it won't be open.
Right, thank you. Okay, I'll move on to my comment, because I think it's important that we do have a shortage of suitable spots for HGVs to rest up overnight, and if we were to shut that site, then obviously that facility for 3 vehicles would be taken away. So I'm quite happy to hear that the site is going to be accessible, although the facilities aren't going to be accessible 24/7. And just like to say that I enjoyed listening to the report, and I think it's very comprehensive. And I also think it's this is quite an innovative thing. And I think being on the side of a major north-south trunk route, which linking the M4 and the 303 down to the southwest, I think it would be a good position to have something like that. So I'm going to propose that we go with the officer's recommendation, but obviously other people need a chance to talk, but that's my proposal.
Okay,
Yes.
well,
Yes.
thank you, John. Do I have a seconder for that,
Yes,
please?
Mr. Chairman, Sherry, I was just coming to say the same thing, so I'd like to
Sir
second.
Jesperson, you're seconded it. Okay, so that is your comment, is it now?
No, well, I was going to just add, there was another comment I wanted to make on, if I may.
Well, you're seconded it and you're on now, so over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. So yes, I agree that this is an interesting and an innovative proposal. It's also a really good example of a planning proposal being amended in the light of public comment and of our planning officers doing the thing that they do so well, which is that negotiation towards the end of a planning application's life. And this feels to me, that felt to me like how planning is supposed to work. So in addition to having enjoyed your presentation, this seems to me to represent a good example of the whole planning process working well. And I just wanted to say that. Mr. Chairman, there will be an impact on the landscape. Of course there will. And I don't think any of us would deny that. But we have to look to the future. And I think that what we've got here is an application that minimises the impact on the landscape, has mitigated it really effectively. It's a very good location for a service such as this. I think it's innovative and interesting, and I would be very pleased to support it. So I'd be very happy to second it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that's appreciated. Thank you very much. I've got Mike Garrity who wants to say a few words.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just to clarify on the support, I was just going to clarify with Councillor Worth, is that with the addition of the condition as was suggested for the permissive path, as well as obviously the other ones relating to the landscaping, the maintenance, and equally the informative note that we were going to put on or proposed to add on. So just to clarify,
yes, yeah,
your proposal is with those included.
It is with those included. Yes, I think they were perfectly justified. So yes.
Does that footpath include the footpath condition? You know, the actual condition, the maintenance of it.
The maintenance of it going forward for the life of the site, actually.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, also the maintenance of the dog walking area for the life of the site as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Happy with that, seconder?
Yes, with those two, second with those two amended conditions and with the informative about HGVs. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move to the vote in a moment, but David, you were just wanted to say something about the path condition. Is that to do with that condition we were talking about?
Yes, it is. I was just wondering if it's possible to try and ensure that the surface on this path is suitable for all weathers. I can see in the muddy, wet parts of the year, it might be rather difficult to walk along the inside of the field boundary, whereas the if the path was maintained to be passable in all weathers or most weathers at least, that would help the local residents walking through to get a cup of coffee there, or to go to the loo, or to go to the dog walking area to enjoy the wildflower meadow. So if possible, if we could go with the fact that there is a condition, but maybe also add to it that it should be all weather.
Well, I think I know what the answer might well be on this. If they're going to consult with our countryside team on this, they'll come up with the most appropriate suggested finish, I would think. But let me not put words into the officer's mouth.
Okay,
Rob, what do you think about the dictating the surface or how it's made up?
Yeah, I think we could word it in a way that would require details to be submitted of that, so then we can consult with the ranger, or the probably the ranger in this instance, and landscapes, because it could, there could be if it's tarmac or something, that could then have an additional landscape impact. So we want to make sure it's appropriate. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, David. Point well made. Thank you. And Shane, come back for a third bite.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it was just, I thought there was something originally in the officer's presentation, particularly concerning the covered walkway with the glass roof, that we would give delegated authority to the officers to approve the building materials and construction materials with the applicant. Did I hear that right originally at the start of the presentation?
Yes, Councillor, there would be a condition requiring details of the external facing materials of the building, the public convenience building, and the canopy. Yeah,
okay, that's fine.
I have to say, Mr. Chairman, knowing the road very well, I think it's unlikely that the residents of Whitchurch are going to be wanting to be walking up that hill to the dog walking area in the depth of winter anyway, because it's pretty bleak. But the all-weather surface would be nice. But yes, it's not very likely that it's not a very attractive prospect for them in the middle of winter.
It's a nice to have idea, but let's be realistic. At least they'll be getting something they haven't got now. And the point about it being behind the hedgerow as well means it's a safe walk if they decide to do it. So,
yeah, right.
Yeah, okay. Right, well, I haven't got any more speakers. I'm going to go to the vote, but just before I do, I would like to just add to this. I mean, a lot of members have made this point. This certainly is a very innovative project. I think it's the way to go. I mean, as we go forward with EV and perhaps other types of fuel, we're going to see more and more of these, I suspect. And there has been some comment about it. Well, it shouldn't be in a rural location, it should be in a town. But rural location perhaps is just the right place for this sort of thing, because it's where you've got, what is it called, range anxiety. People that have got electric vehicles suffer from range anxiety, and when you're driving out between Blandford and Dorchester, and you suddenly think you've got enough juice, you don't want to have to worry about getting to Dorchester. So it does have benefits, and I think it's very well thought out. Benefits to a greater number of people than just electricity. So there is, I think, very good reason for the stance that we're taking on this. And indeed, I'm going to move to the vote. And once again, I intend actually to vote on this one. So once again, once I get my list, bear with me a moment. I've lost my list here now. Typical, isn't it? Typical. Everything was going so well. Right, go through the names then. He says, bear with me a second.
It'll be on your agenda,
right, I've got it,
Chairman.
No, I've got it here. So I've put it on another table. It's okay. It's all right. It's these glasses again. Okay. Right. Are you ready? Now, don't forget, you've state whether you've seen the presentation, they've been here throughout, etc., and is minded to either support or not. So, Councillor John Worth.
Yes, I've been present throughout, taking part in the discussion, and my minded to decision is to support the officer's recommendation.
Cool. Councillor Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the entire officer's presentation. I've taken part in the debate, and I'm minded to support the recommendation and the attached conditions and the informative note. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dave Bolwell.
Yes, Chair. I've seen the presentation. I've heard the debate, and I'm minded to approve.
Cool. Alex is not here. Kelvin's not here. Councillor Jean Dunseith.
Thank you, Chairman. I've seen the presentation. I've listened to the debate, and I support the officer's recommendation.
Cool. Councillor Sherry Jesperson.
Thank you, Chair. I've seen the presentation, taken part in the debate, and I'm minded to support.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
Sorry, Chairman, I have to abstain as I lost the picture during the officer's presentation.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Councillor David Took.
I've been present throughout, taken part in the debate, and I'm minded to approve the proposal, including all the conditions as we discussed.
Thank you. And my vote again, I've been here throughout the presentation, taking part in the debate, and I'm minded to support the proposal. And on that basis, I make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 for and 1 abstention.
Yes,
Elaine?
I agree, Chairman.
So that is carried. Well, Mike, you've got to make the final decision, but that's the minded to decision.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can confirm that I've too listened to the presentation and I've heard all of the debate, and I can confirm the decision will be made in accordance with the wishes of the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us on now then to item 8, urgent items, and there are no urgent items of business. Item 9, exempt business. There is no exempt business. So on that note, again, thanks to everybody on this session today, both this morning and this afternoon, and the officers for all their work on these applications. The work we appreciate that goes into it is extremely detailed, and we appreciate the way it's put over to us. So thank you all for that. On that note, at 3:35, I close the meeting. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you all.
Thank you.